The night the baby dragons chose a guardian, the mountain was silent beneath a sky filled with slow drifting stars. Cold wind whispered through the black stone cliffs as if the world itself was holding its breath, waiting for something ancient to awaken. High above the valley where molten rivers once carved glowing scars into the earth, a forgotten temple stood broken and hollow, its pillars cracked by centuries of storms. Inside that temple, on a bed of fallen banners, an old Ashen human slept as though he had no idea he was trespassing in the cradle of dragons. His armor lay beside him, dented and scarred from battles that no one would sing about, and his sword rested within reach, but his hand was relaxed, not gripping the hilt. He did not sleep like a conqueror claiming territory. He slept like a traveler who had walked too far and finally allowed himself to rest. Far beyond the temple gates, hidden among jagged rocks, a cluster of pale eggs trembled under the thin glow of moonlight. They had waited too long. Their mother had not returned. The scent of a fire had faded from the air days ago, and hunger and instinct now stirred within fragile shells. One had cracked first. A thin silver line split across its surface, and a tiny claw pushed through into the cold world. Then another crack followed, and another. Small wet forms emerged, trembling with newborn confusion, their scales soft and unpolished, their wings too weak to lift them. They chirped softly, not with the roar of their kind, but with uncertain, searching sounds. They expected heat. They expected the rumble of a dragon heart. They expected the shadow of their mother. Instead, the wind answered. The mountain answered. The stars answered. But no dragon came. The smallest hatchling lifted its head and sniffed the air as instinct guided it, not toward the cliffs, not toward the sky, but toward the scent drifting from the temple. It was not dragon fire. It was not blood. It was something strange. Something warm. Something alive. The hatchling stumbled clumsily over stone and as following that unfamiliar scent like it was a thread pulling them forward. Each step was awkward, their claws scraping rock, their tiny wings dragging uselessly behind them. The temple loomed before them, a place dragons once avoided because humans had built it long ago. Yet the hatchlings did not know fear of humans. They only knew need. They crossed the broken threshold and entered the shadowed hall where moonlight fell in pale strips across the floor. At the center of that silent ruin, the human slept unmoving, unaware that ancient golden eyes were studying him. The smallest dragon approached first, its nose twitching as it circled the sleeping figure. It sniffed his boots. It sniffed his gauntlets. It sniffed the worn leather straps that smelled of sweat and iron in distant battlefields. The hatchling tilted its head. This creature was not dragon, but it was warm. It crept closer until it reached his chest, where the rise and fall of breath created a steady rhythm like a calm tide. The hatchling placed one small claw against his armor. The metal was cool, but beneath it the warmth was strong. The other hatchlings joined cautiously, forming a loose circle around the sleeping human. They chirped to one another in soft, uncertain tones. Then the boldest among them climbed awkwardly up his side, slipping once before finding purchase on the folds of his cloak. It reached his shoulder and curled instinctively near his neck where warmth gathered strongest. The human shifted slightly in his sleep, but did not wake. The hatchling let out a small, contented sound and tucked its head beneath his chin. The others watched. Then one by one they followed. Tiny bodies pressed against him. Small claws hooked into cloth. Soft wings draped over his chest. They were cold. He was warm. An instinct older than language whispered to them that warmth meant safety. Outside, the wind howled stronger as clouds covered the moon. The temperature dropped sharply across the mountain. Within minutes, frost began to form along the temple stones. The hatchlings trembled. Without their mother, they would not survive the coming night. But the human body beneath them radiated steady heat like a living hearth. The smallest dragon pressed closer, its heartbeat fluttering fast against his collarbone. The human exhaled slowly, and one hand moved unconsciously, resting lightly over the cluster of tiny bodies. His palm settled protectively, without thought, without awareness. The hatchling stilled. Something about that touch was different from dragon scale. It was softer, but it did not harm. It did not push them away. It shielded them from the cold wind that slipped through broken walls. Hours passed. Snow began to fall outside, dusting the temple steps in white. Inside, the human slept on, unaware that his cloak now cradled the future of a dragon brood. The first light of dawn crept slowly across the horizon, staining the sky with pale gold. The human stirred as morning chill reached his face. His eyes opened, slowly blinking against the thin sunlight. He inhaled, then froze, because his chest felt heavier than it should. He looked down. and met the gaze of 6 tiny dragons staring back at him with bright, unblinking eyes. For a long moment no one moved. The smallest dragon tilted its head and made a questioning chirp. The human did not reach for his sword. He did not shout. He did not throw them aside. Instead, he blinked once more as if confirming he was not still dreaming. Then he whispered softly, "Well, this is new." The dragons did not understand his words, but they understood tone. No threat, no anger, no fear. The bold hatchling climbed high until it was perched on his shoulder, staring directly into his eyes. The human studied the creature. Its scales shimmered faintly in the light like molten silver cooling into form. Its wings were delicate, almost translucent. It was impossibly small compared to the legends. He slowly lifted his hand, giving the hatchling time to retreat if it wished. It did not retreat. Instead, it leaned into his fingers as though seeking contact. His rough, calloused hand gently stroked the top of its head. The dragon closed its eyes. The others chirped louder now, scrambling over him with sudden excitement. One tugged playfully at his cloak. Another attempted to flap its tiny wings. The human sat up slowly, careful not to dislodge them. He looked around the empty temple, then toward the mountain entrance. No adult dragon. No nest nearby. No signs of protection. Only 6 newborn hatchlings who had clearly decided he belonged to them. He exhaled long and slow. "You have terrible timing, little ones." But as he said it, his voice carried no irritation, only reluctant warmth. One dragon crawled into his lap, curling into a tight ball. Another nestled against his side. The smallest climbed back to his shoulder and refused to move. The human glanced at the snowfall thickening outside. If he left them, they would freeze. If he stayed, they might survive. And somewhere deep inside him, something that had once longed for a family he never built stirred painfully. He ran a hand through his hair and laughed quietly. So this is how it happens. A soldier walks into a mountain alone, and walks out adopted by dragons. The hatchlings chirped in unison as though agreeing. He gathered his cloak around them, pulling them closer to share his warmth. The smallest dragon yawned, exposing tiny sharp teeth, not yet dangerous, but promising they would be. The human looked at each of them, carefully memorizing their patterns, their slight differences. One had darker wings. One had brighter eyes. One seemed braver than the rest. He felt a strange certainty settle in his chest. They had chosen him, not because he was strong, not because he was human, but because when they found warmth, he did not push them away. And somewhere beyond the mountains, unseen ancient eyes watched from distant cliffs, observing the impossible sight. Dragon hatchlings resting peacefully in the arms of a human guardian. And the wind carried a whisper across the peaks. Something had changed.